Welcome to Checking In with Dr. B, a space dedicated to live conversations with those who have found and lived their joy. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Kendall K. Williams, composer, arranger, performer, lecturer at universities, and so much more. But he's going to go through his journey with us. And so, welcome, Dr. Williams.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. It feels so weird to hear that still. Just yeah, I don't know. I'm very humble. I don't know, maybe I may ask some questions to you, on the side about just, how this works in terms of being called a doctor and so on and so forth. But I've always been so humble and it just feels like at some points I just still want to kind of operate as the normal person that everyone knows me to be, which is still just Kendall. And I just happen to have, some letters in front or behind, or, however we look at it. But yeah, thank you for having me. My journey, right? It started, I guess, when I was 4. So really long ago. My mother and father both play. And just being an only child, growing up mostly in the 90s where, technology isn't what it is today or wasn't, what it is today. Steel pan was kind of the thing to do, to follow in their footsteps. And I was always around it. They never, at least as far as I can remember, they never really hid me from the pan yards, both in Trinidad and Miami and New York. And so, I just wanted to be in that. I wanted to play. I wanted to immerse myself. And I realized from very young too, the music, it really took me. I really felt like the music, it carried me places that I couldn't really explain. I felt, so many different emotions from the music, and I really enjoyed that. I really wanted to pursue that in so many ways, and I didn't really. I think going through like the schooling system and not being exposed to it, like maybe during the day, I think also kind of had me thinking that maybe this may not be a long-term thing. And I think that's interesting now, just because I'm now based in New York. I grew up in Miami. I'm now based in New York, where I teach in elementary schools. I teach in high schools, as well, in addition to colleges. We'll talk about that, right? And there's pans in middle schools as well. So it's like it's different, just I think seeing it now as on the teacher side that these kids have the opportunity to learn in schools, whereas I didn't get to see it in school until, of course, I got to Florida Memorial, which I know I'm like jumping around and skipping all over the place, but I didn't get to see it until I got to Florida Memorial. And I think at that point I realized just how much more possible having a career in steel pan really was. But should I go back any?
What I wanted, one of the things you said was that
Hmm.
you're teaching in the K through 12 system, you're teaching in the university system. One of the things that I noted about you is that you touch so many different communities. You deal with the seniors, you deal with peers, you deal with youngsters, you deal on the university level. But through it all, you spoke about that humility. You have that humble essence, whereas you always know Kendall is Kendall. Regardless of where Kendall is placed, that essence is there. What do you think brought you to that? What is it that makes Kendall Kendall?
Hmm. That's a good question. I'm not fully sure. I'm not fully sure. I do remember, like, I've always had dreams, and I would always say that my dreams have definitely driven me 90, maybe 100, most of my life dreams have driven me to get to the places that I've wanted to get to. And one of my many dreams was, as you know, to be an arranger, right? Because that's one of the things that we spoke about. And of course, you were a huge part of the reason I took the composition route, because you actually introduced me to composition when I wanted to be an arranger, and you were like, "Well, this is the path to that, right?" But when I remember early, 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 when I wanted to be an arranger, one of the things I wanted to do was be able to create music that people could enjoy, but specifically that no one would know it was me creating the music. Yeah, and it's a shy thing that I guess I have maybe about me. And that's part of maybe the humbleness as well, is just always being shy and not really wanting to be in the forefront, not wanting to be the person in front of the music, but more so behind the music, literally behind the music. And I mean, I think I'm still that way. Now I would say for sure, I still sometimes hope that I can just do music, people enjoy it, and just have no idea who did it. But it was me, just because I just want them to enjoy it, not because I don't want to be. I think the older that I get and the more experience I see now, it becomes there becomes this sort of, I guess people associate music with a person, and I feel like the politics then come into play, and this is in all different genres and types of music. I hear it about it every day on the radio with like the rappers and the R&B singers and all these different genres. It's like so much is tied to their names, and if maybe this person is blacklisted because they said something wrong, or whatever the thing is. And I look at music as such a pure thing, and this like music does nothing but really make us feel good, and make us feel these vibrations within our body. And I just feel like it's so pure, so I hold it to this high regard, and I don't like to feel like music is tainted in any kind of way. And I think that's part of like the detachment, don't associate me with this, just enjoy it for what it is.
Oh, that's really interesting. You were recently hooded at Princeton University with your doctorate. Speak a little bit about that program and how that program ties into being the person behind the music and in the music
um
too.
mhm. The program, composition. Oh, 8 years at Princeton, first to begin. Right, 8 years, 8 years. The first 2 to 3 years were filled with classes that really just, I think, broke down composition in a whole entirely different way, and allowed me to, I think, discover a bit more of myself as a composer, as a arranger, as a person, realizing that there are so many different ways we can approach and look at music, and also just to even identify or to speak about what music is. And so, uh, I mean, this is me in true fashion. Sorry, I'm always going to jump around, so I
That's
apologize.
okay.
That could
That's all
be
right. That's music. That's creation.
right. So in my time there, I sort of learned just to embrace myself in every way, like who I am, how I feel, and put that within the music. And so if today I'm feeling comical, I'll write something. For example, I wrote a piece for a percussion quartet called Breaking Down, and it was to mimic the idea that after rehearsals, mainly for steel band. Well, I mean, maybe rehearsals for anyone. That people have to break down their instruments, so they have to put instruments back in their cases. They pack up their stands, so on and so forth. And so the majority of the piece was more of movement and accidentally dropping things, and so it was directions, walk here, drop this, clank these things together, put this away, move that out the way, and very few notes, and when I was writing it, I hoped that people would laugh, and when they did perform it, people in the audience were laughing, and I like that because in this chamber music and all these things that we were talking about, the classical, the contemporary, the chamber music groups, I, just realized there's always a sense of like seriousness, and, people, they want the score and they want to see this, and, they want the program notes because they want to know. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to know. I want you to, let's disconnect from all of the literary material and let's just enjoy this, as though we were 10 years old or 5 years old or whatever age you want to be, but just enjoy it. I as much the more that I've I've gone through the process at Princeton University and just again like learning different things, I just realized that I try to get to places where people can close their eyes and listen to the music and just get, engulfed in the melodies and the harmonies, the notation, the nuances, the movement, the voice, everything that just makes up music. And I think all of that has just been a part of realizing again that anything could be music, any sound, any action, anything could be considered that. And I feel like the more that I discover that and the more that I realize that is the more that I realize I haven't reached anywhere with music. There's just so much that can be done, so many opportunities, so many possibilities, so many variables. So,
And you spoke about all the things that go into music. And I mentioned before the communities that you're involved with.
mhm.
Because you moved from Florida Memorial to NYU, then to Princeton. Am I right? That was,
Yes.
so in each of those, you have totally different communities. How did that journey affect your music and you as a person?
Um, Florida Memorial was very homey. And I felt very much so embraced. I think maybe because there was a lot of steel pan, which was great, and something that I always speak about, even though we had a few rehearsals a week, which is very different, I would say, from NYU. NYU, we usually only have one rehearsal a week at the steel band when I went there. But at Florida Memorial, we had, I think it was like two or three rehearsals a week. Yet I rehearsed every day, right? I took advantage of the opportunity to be able to play steel pan every day, and that was, one of my goals and one of my dreams was to be able to go to school and play every day. And so at that point in my life, it was a very comfortable feeling. I started to feel like I could branch out and do other things because I didn't feel like the odd man out. I felt like I was in a very rich environment, and then I think it also helped very much so that you being the director of the steel band, you were a very motherly figure within your sternness, for us to do what we needed to do, and for the program and for us to graduate and just also push ourselves to go further and so on and so forth. And I think that really helped me. It was really an environment that I needed to be in. And I don't know, I think I felt like maybe I understood it at times while I was there, but I appreciated it even more when I left because then I started to realize how when I started to have to come out of my comfort zone or just to do things that I wasn't used to and so on. I started to realize again more about myself, more about what I needed to feel comfortable and how me being comfortable allows me to create to my fullest potential. So when I left there and I went to NYU, it was definitely a different experience to the big city. Uh, Everything is like fast paced and moving, and I'm really not used to that. If you stand up and stare too long, people bump you, and you could end up in the street before you know it, and you didn't intend on that. All these different things, you know what I mean? But the school system there though was also great and just very interesting. One of the first people I met was Joshua Quillen, who ran the steel band there, and he was also very welcoming, as were the students. That's something that I was very grateful for. But I also had this sense of I guess maybe I brought in some more individuality there. And I think maybe because again, just me being shy, I stayed away quite a bit. Everyone there, they were much stronger readers than I was at the time. But they were also all percussionists, and so they steel pan might not have been the thing for them, whereas it was for me. And so that was my strong suit. I came in knowing how to play really well, and just had to catch up with reading, and they were sort of the opposite. And I think that sort of brought some interesting relationships as well. But overall, the environment was just it was welcoming. It was welcoming, and I don't want to say it was as welcoming as Florida Memorial because I honestly it wasn't, but it was welcoming in its own way, and I appreciated that. And I feel like I used I got as much as I could out of it. I tried to take advantage of opportunities and, to work with different people. I landed on this great composer named Michael Gordon, who, really started to open me up to, different things. And I think he really brought me in as well. And I think that same sort of feeling of comfortability that I received with you, I then sort of found in him in lots of ways from a composing aspect. Josh was always great and was always around and supportive as far as the steel band was concerned. But because I was in the composition department, Michael Gordon, he really brought me in, I think, and really worked with me and pushed me and, and taught me so many things, even outside of the music, just, coming into more professionalism and, different things and stuff like that. And I feel like all of that is a part of how music then becomes portrayed, right? The way you write music, because then mentality starts to become involved. And at least for me, I should speak for myself. I don't know how other people approach their music, but I think when I'm in the right space of mind and frame of mind, the way that I think influences the music that I create. And he helped me in a great deal, just sort of find those things and look at things completely different. I'll never forget. He asked to see one of my panorama arrangements one time, and in one of our composition lessons, and then he says, in panorama arranging, something is always happening. Like there's always things happening at the same time. You know what I mean? And so he started picking it apart. He's like, "Why is this group always strumming?" And I was like, that's kind of what we do. In panorama we strum. And he was like, just like, yeah. And he wasn't, not criticizing. He was, genuinely asking these questions. And then he was like, "But what if maybe you pulled that out for a minute or two? What would happen?" And I was like, that's interesting. I don't, I'm not really sure I've ever heard, a band maybe sustain itself for so long without strumming, the things that we feel drive the rhythms and so on and so forth. And just with those little things, like he started to get me to just flip music upside down and look at it from an entirely different perspective. And that was great. I really, appreciated that. And again, things that I'll never forget. But then I made my way to Princeton, and Michael Gordon was one of the driving forces behind that, him and Josh, who recommended that I even apply to Princeton. And when I got there, I think Princeton has probably so far been the most overwhelming experience in maybe every way. Um, at Florida Memorial, our campus, very small, very tight knit. You know what I mean? You could walk end to end, no problem. NYU, all my classes were in one building. So even though New York University is like, immersed in the city itself, I was only ever in one building, maybe two, at any given point in time. Then you get to Princeton, and Princeton is like an entire town. You park in the parking lot and you take a shuttle to get to the, you know, and if I missed the shuttle and I had to walk from the parking lot to the music building, it was maybe like a 10 to 15-minute walk. If I'm casual and if I'm late or something, it's a brisk 10-minute walk or 8-minute run or something like that. And that's actually quite lengthy, lengthier than it may sound, honestly speaking. And so I think one thing I notice about myself is that it takes me a while sometimes to get comfortable in situations. And that I believe is really what happened with me at Princeton. It took me a while to really get into, the mix of things, understanding, the culture. It took me a while to find a professor that I could hold on to and that could, just take me under their wing a little bit more and really express, just sort of help me find the things that I feel like I need or I needed, and I did eventually get it. So that's great. And that definitely helped with the experience. But in that time, the first maybe 2 or 3 years, it was still kind of rough navigating a little bit and just trying to find it as best as I could. But I mean, of course, for me, it's also about the journey and understanding that that's part of the process. And so, there will be times where I'll be uncomfortable and I can't, figure things out or I don't know, but I tried as much as possible to just embrace the journey and understanding that even though this is maybe not the full experience I wanted in this moment, that I could get there. And I am, more than happy to say that at the end of, my Princeton journey as far as a student, I actually did get everything that I wanted and that I needed out of it. And I felt like there were times in between where I questioned that, a little here and there. But the journey at Princeton, I think by far elongated the information surrounding composition. Anything that I thought, again, it was like we just took it 10 times further. We flipped everything up over, on multiple axes. We started to really just, I don't even know how to understand music anymore, but just to do it and to really just embrace the very simple, simple, simple things. And so I'm maybe a little bit more into minimalism and surrealism now than I ever was before. I mean, before I didn't even know what it was, right? Or just embracing, composers like Xanaxis, and that type of music, and just again, just understanding that music could also just be anything, absolutely anything. And, working with groups like Soul Percussion, who amazing, gentlemen who can play anything, who are willing to try anything, and who just do so many amazing things that they've also taught me lots in the process because they're in residence at Princeton as well. They're the percussion group in residence, and so we are able to work with them, one on one in a classroom setting as well. And so all of these things have just been thrown into my music now. I'm like, I feel like I'm finished, and I am just as excited about music as I was when I was 5 and 6 years old. I feel like a kid in a candy store. There's so many things I want to try, and just hoping that I have enough time on this earth to try all the things that I'm thinking of in my head.
But that's wonderful that you can say that you're excited, at this stage after all you've gone through, that you're still as excited as when you were 5 years old. And I know in the journey there had to be lots of downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. How did you give yourself the energy, the push to go to the next step when sometimes it must have seemed like, I can't do this anymore?
Right. I mean, experience is definitely has a huge part to play in it. I think in just it's like learning, maybe, extending your vocabulary, right? And I feel like, the with experience, and I make this comparison between experience and vocabulary to say that I think the more you experience or the more you extend your vocabulary is the maybe better you can express yourself sometimes, or you could express yourself in a different way. So you might say it one way and someone doesn't understand, but you have enough in your vocabulary to say it another way, and maybe they may not understand that, but again, you have enough in your vocabulary to say it another way. And so I think with experience, for me, it that's what it became. The more that I learned just in life outside of music was like, okay, why don't I apply what I'm learning, or what I'm experiencing in my life at this moment to the music? How can I get over this or get around this? And so, for example, one thing that I learned at Princeton and fairly early on, was, I believe, I always mess up his name sometimes, but I believe it's Brian Eno, I believe. And he came up with this thing called oblique strategies. And I'm not even sure when he came up with this, but this idea called oblique strategies, and it was really sort of like a tool for writer's block. And so he would have these cards, and I'm not sure how he came up with this concept, but black cards with white writing, and they all just had sort of like small little commands or sayings. And it would say things like, do it again, or flip it over, or reverse, or, just 1, 2, 3 word, these little things. And so when I was introduced to that, I started to use that in my writer's block or just in tough times and things like that, and it helped me process and approach music again differently. And all types of music that I've done, from panorama music to my smaller competition compositions, from solos, quartets, so on and so forth. And so if it says something like do it again, maybe for me I would say, well, why don't I repeat that? Or if I was stuck on a line, why don't I repeat that one note? You know what I mean? Or repeat this melody maybe in a different way. And it was really, for me, it was about just interpreting whatever the card says, which was what it was supposed to be. It was open to complete interpretation. And so if it said do it in reverse, I wouldn't skip that card. I would maybe just reverse the whole melody that I played and see what that looked like now, you know? And I think by doing that, and, you know, at times I had to scrap the idea because I didn't like the way it sounded. But I think what it did was it gave me, it generated new ideas now, right? And that's what I appreciated about it. And then in the maybe in the inverse, I started to apply the oblique strategies to my life as well, you know, outside of music. So when I found maybe I was having a tough day, I would, you know, go in. He used to have an app, so I would just use it in my phone. So I would open the app, and the minute I tap my screen, a new command would come up, and I would apply that new command to whatever, you know, I was going through in my life. So if it said, you know, do it again or something, maybe I would speak again. I would say something again that, you know, maybe I feel someone didn't hear me the way, you know, I would have liked them to hear me or something like that. But what I found very much so in what I do greatly, as far as music and life, is that I've always used the other to, you know, to help me get through whatever time it is. And so if I've learned something, and I always tell people the discipline that my mother and my father, but specifically my father, instilled in me in steel pan, as far as just when we are at rehearsals, you're standing up behind your pan, you know, you're waiting for maybe the notes to be called or whatever it is, but you're not playing, you're not running around, you're not, you know, you're not doing that. We in the pan yard. So, you know, you stand up here, and those little things started to help me in school. You know, I would be a little bit more focused now, you know, maybe more than, you know, other children around my age, because I'm thinking, you know, Panyard, I need to be prepared for what is about to come to me. You know what I mean? And so, and I still do that to today. I think it's, you know, it's gotten me this far, right? So maybe why change that? You know,
Exactly.
I'd rather
Exactly.
add to it, if anything.
Yeah. I know you spoke about your mom and dad. Speak about the importance of family in your life.
Yes. So you know, my parents were recently up in New York for my graduation, right, which was just a few days ago. And I believe it was either the day, because they left, what, like maybe 2 days after that. And I spoke to my mother, you know, and I was, well, both of them, you know, individually and together. And I just started to tell them how much I really appreciated the support that they've given me throughout my life. And, you know, maybe that's easy to say, or maybe it was, you know, heartfelt and heartwarming coming from me and, you know, being older and so on and so forth. But what I specifically told them is that in working with K through 12, especially, because they're, you know, they're so young, they're impressionable, you know, you know, you have the young ones, like right now it's third, fourth, and fifth grade I'm specifically working with in the elementary school setting, and then also high school, which is it's a mixed crew. But I have the ones who are, you know, now sort of coming into their lives, right, and now sort of understanding these things, and then I have the others that are really getting ready to, you know, go to the next level as far as, you know, college education, or maybe some of them have already told me that they don't even plan on going to college, but they plan on, you know, pursuing work. But what I've realized is that they all come with different stories. They all come with, you know, different situations and things like that. And in hearing them, it's like it makes me, you know, just that much more grateful for having, you know, my parents be able to push me and you know, and support me, and to, you know, say, yes, you can do this, and, you know, you're capable, and, you know, just instilling certain values and so on and so forth in me that I've definitely held on to, and I've used again every step of my life and of my, you know, musical journey and my musical career as well. The way that I treat people, the way that I speak to people, the, you know, the way that I'm friendly with the adult classes that I teach. You know, I love my adult classes. I really love my adult classes. You know, the kids are great. The, you know, the young ones, the students are fine, but something about those adult classes, these seniors, they always come excited to play. It's crazy, you know what I mean? Like the kids, they're like bouncing off the walls, you know, they're doing so many different things. And that's fun, you know, it's all different experiences. And I think that's why I like it. But part of a great part of the values that my parents have instilled in me is what takes me to these communities, as you had mentioned before as well. Like this is what takes me to these communities is like I see an opportunity to help, and if I can, I will do it. And that was something that I remember my father told me when I was young. If you may not always have, but if you can help somebody, you help somebody. My mother has told me that before as well. So when I feel like I have, even if it's a little bit of time, I'll put this group in front of my own needs, in front of my own wants. I mean, I've seen my parents do that, many times for me, many times over. They've needed things, and they've, put my needs before their own. And so, I just try to pay that forward and help others when I can. And, and then also with my two young children, I have two girls, Madison and Morgan. And so I try to now instill some of the same values in them, and, teaching them to, be nice and caring, and, and learning things, also trying to teach them pan, when they want to sit down and, and hear it, and so on and so forth. But, also some of the bigger things and the bigger goals that I feel like I picked up on, when I was younger, and I didn't always learn in the household. Sometimes I learned it outside, which is all a part of like education. And I also try to tell people that like education is more than just the classroom, right? You learn things in the house. You even learn things, hanging out with friends, whether they're a good influence or a bad influence or an influence that you don't necessarily agree with. But that's all part of like, the education and experience. You're learning things, you're learning what you like, what you don't like, what you want to be around, what you don't want to be associated with, so on and so forth. And so these are the things that I still continue to tell myself. I still continue to observe. I continue to teach my kids that. I continue to teach my students that. I also call them my kids at times, but my students. So yeah.
But I met some of your seniors and they love you.
Yes.
They,
Oh,
they
great.
do love you. And when you were headed, one of the most touching moments I found was to see your two girls there with you, and your older
Hmm.
girl she had on your cap, and
Yes.
that was so. What did they think? Did they say anything to you?
No, actually, so originally I've tried to include them on as many moments in my life that I feel like I could have, and part of it is that I think experiencing life in, different ways can influence, what you do in the future, right? So my youngest, she, happened to be born right before COVID. So at least maybe half of her life right now was COVID, right? That's how, that's where she is. So she hasn't, fully gotten to experience Trinidad in all the ways that my oldest has gotten to experience. But for example, my oldest, on at least one occasion, maybe two, I was able to have her on stage with me for Panorama in the middle of the band with earmuffs on, letting her dance her life away. And, that was something that I would have loved to experience when I was younger, but I didn't necessarily have that opportunity, and so being an arranger, in Trinidad and having that, for whatever reason, I don't have to count the band. I don't have, my responsibilities at that moment is to support and to, and those types of things. And so I saw that as an opportunity to bring her and let her experience music from inside of the band. And I never forget actually I believe it was my first Panorama in Trinidad playing as a younger individual. I played inside the middle of the band, and that was one of the best experiences I had with Phase Two. It was like surround sound, of music. You had the bass right next to me, you had quads and behind me. I was playing guitar, you had all these different things, and I just felt like I got a very nice balance of the band. And as I got older and I started to play different places, I would play, in the front line and this and that. I was like, but wait, I don't hear the band as good when you play all the way in the front. It doesn't the energy doesn't feel the same. You know what I mean? And so, just those different things. Bringing her to the pan yard. I've taken my oldest on stage as well in New York Panorama. So just uh, bringing them into those settings, I try to do as much of that as possible. Just because, if they don't understand it in the moment, hopefully later on, they'll see the importance of that. And I realized that for myself, both when I was younger, when I didn't understand things in a moment, but I understood it after. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is that one person actually set the tone and took his newborn on stage with him. Yeah, so he set the tone. And then after that, slowly but surely you saw other individuals taking their children. And I say, maybe I won't, maybe I'll still just, just play it cool and just do what I have to do. But then this woman comes up on stage with about 8 children. Yes, and it
Oh,
was a beautiful moment.
yes.
Absolutely beautiful moment. So I had at one point in time, I looked back, and my daughter was like waving, my oldest, and she was like, "Daddy, I want to go on stage with you." And one of the, the ushers behind me was like, "Is that your daughter?" And I was like, "Yeah, she's been with me on this entire journey. She was, born right before I started at Princeton, so she knows how this has gone." And she was like, "Oh yeah, take her up with you." And I was like, but I have two. She was like, "Take them both." So I was like, all right, great. I appreciate it, because it is something that I would have liked for them to do, with being respectful, of course, of the ceremony and so on and so forth. But it was definitely an amazing moment to be able to have them up there with me because that's not happening again, right? Like not with me at least. That's it for me. So,
And that,
I really did take advantage of that opportunity and that moment to be able to do it. And, I don't regret a thing about that. That's for sure. I honestly, I did give my youngest daughter the option of wearing the cap. She declined, and the oldest one was like, "I'll wear it." So I was like, "All
right?
right, no problem." No problem, no problem. So yeah, so so it was a beautiful moment, and I'm glad that they got to experience that with me. I hope that that's something that later on they'll carry with them.
I'm sure they will because you've taken the foundation that your parents laid for you and the experiences, and now you're carrying it on with your daughters, and that I
Yes,
think is awesome.
yeah, and also one thing that I always tell people and I would never forget is my dad. He also, well, both my parents really, when they would go to Trinidad, you're going in the pan yards and you're going there late and so on and so forth. And when I was really younger, I used to cry, because I didn't want to stay home. I wanted to go with them, right? And both of them were going, so it's like, wait, how you leaving me and you going in and enjoy yourself and I can be there. And the thing is, they would take me, but then I would fall asleep, right? But in hearing the stories and older gentlemen, they still tell me that today. They would say, your father, he used to stand up in that pan yard for hours with you on his shoulder. He used to be sleeping and knocked out, and he would just stand up and hold you, and he wouldn't put you down. He wouldn't put you in the car nowhere. Or sometimes they would go. If a band had stands or something, they would go sit down in the stands, and I would lay across their lap and things like that. But I feel like all of that is a part of what really got me into this, to where, I hear, music at all different times of the day. I hear music in my sleep. I was memorizing, panorama tunes for as long as I could remember and singing it, note for note, melody for melody, harmony for harmony, because of those moments, being able to fall asleep in the pan yard and then wake up in the pan yard and say, "Wait, we still here? We didn't reach back home yet." I still sleeping in the stands or on your shoulder. But just the fact that he was able to take me, or they really were able to take me, in the pan yard instead of maybe the traditional keeping your children home, which I respect, and that's not for everybody, and sometimes pan yard is not always the most conducive place for children anyway. But I didn't know that when I was young, so I'm pushing and forcing my way to try to get there. But I appreciate that they allowed me to do that, and that they also kept me, not necessarily sheltered, but just, but well, maybe sheltered, but they kept me, away from maybe the things that that maybe I shouldn't be seeing or whatever, and but also made sure that I saw what I could see and what was most appropriate for me as far as the music and the dancing and the enjoying yourself and being swept away in the music, seeing people close their eyes as they play and sweat and all those different things. And it's just like, wow, this is an experience. How can I be a part of that? How can I create for people to now, experience my music in that way, which is where I am today. I'm I'm trying to continue to create music that people can experience in those different ways.
And I noticed with the pieces of yours that I've heard is that you said something earlier on. You said that you don't want people to know that you with that particular piece. And I could see it because you're not using the instrument in its traditional ways, or the other instruments, you might be using them in a way that you expect to hear in a panyard, but it's always different.
Hmm.
So those experiences are now allowing you to create that music that is not what one would expect if one were just to look at you on the surface.
Right. I mean, I'm maybe just continue to be a kid at heart and just continue to operate that dreams are possible, dreams come true, you can all these different things, and so just continuing to have fun and try new things as much as possible, and just push the bar and push the barriers that I feel exist, but that I don't feel should exist, and I don't sometimes even see when I'm creating music, because again, I just feel like they shouldn't exist, as far as like music is concerned. And I mean, I understand the historical context of it as well, you know what I mean? And so operating with the rules and so on and so forth. But as one of the things that I also tell people, and I also operate by, I feel like we're in a time where we can unapologetically create. We don't really have to be sorry for what we're doing or how we're doing it. And so in that sense, I feel like we can just create anything, right? We can make anything, and someone out there is going to appreciate it, someone out there is going to like it and enjoy it, and if it's just one person, that's more than good enough for me. I remember doing music and nobody had ever heard it, and I was always sort of wondering and asking for those opportunities. Can I just do verse and chorus just so someone can hear? Now it's different. I wouldn't even ask to do a verse and chorus. Now I might ask to just do a minute of music, of any sort, just because now I just want people to hear that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. My experiences have just continued to fill up what I do within the music, and I'm more than proud to say that Steel Pan has gotten me this far as far as education. Like Steel Pan was the driving force behind me wanting to pursue education. How can I bring awareness to Steel Pan, more awareness to Steel Pan? How can people see this in another light, in another way, appreciate it, for something else that, they may like or they may enjoy, and just, hearing it in just all these different ways. Because I feel like there's just so much out there that we just haven't really done yet. We haven't, touched on. There's, some things that maybe I won't say on the podcast as far as, my compositional ideas, but I feel like there's just so much that can be done and can be fooled around with and played around with, as far as Teal Pan is concerned. So I feel like we're although Steel Pan has really been around since what, the 30s, the 40s, so on and so forth. Yeah, still very much, I think, on the surface of what can be done with Steel Pan on a global scale. Um, yeah, I have big plans.
No, that's I'm excited about that. So you've learned the rules to break the rules to touch the people, and
Yes.
and you're also an entrepreneur, and you have Pan in Motion. Where do you see that going? And to go back to what's next for the instrument, for people, for the world, what do you see?
Um, so Pen in Motion, I believe, so the idea started while I was at NYU. I would remember I was, New York is not the easiest place to park. And me coming from Miami, I had to drive up here. I had to have my car with me and all that good stuff. But going to school in Manhattan, it's that much harder to find parking. And so one day I'm driving around Manhattan, I'm looking for parking, and must have been over an hour of just driving around the same few blocks, just circling looking for parking. And I started to reflect, as I try to do every so often, on where I'm at in my life, in my career, as far as music and arranging, and where do I see myself ending up? How is this going to sustain myself? Which is really the main thing. Which was at that time was the main thing for me, and really it still is now, because now it becomes a driving force for, well, what can I do to sustain myself as an individual with Steel Pan. And so the idea to create an organization, because at the time I didn't know it would be Pan in Motion, but to create an organization that could that was really just well, I guess a company, literally an organization, right? A company that had artists, like myself, like other Steel Pan people, and could potentially operate like a record label, but not limited to you having to necessarily create records. But the way that I view Steel Pan and the industry is that there's so many people that do so many different things. And, New York, I think, is that place, not only for dreams, but also in realizing that there's so many different sort of like colors and palettes of people, and and things that they can do, so many things that exist. And so in thinking about that, I'm like, but wait, I could have an organization that that has employees that only want to write about Steel Pan, or only want to do photography for Steel Pan, or only want to do social media, which was sort of started to become more of a thing at that point in time as well, for Steel Pan. And so, and marketing for Steel Pan. And so I started to think, larger than just I want to be able to, do this for me, but well, what can I do for this larger audience? Because I must not be the only one with this sort of thought process that, Steel Pan is going to be the career for the rest of my life. And so as I started to develop that more and more while I was at NYU, as far as just a thought, it started to become, well, I need this. And so once I'm out of school, like again, it was just experience. And I think New York is also a great place for that as well. But, I started to think, well, if I get sick, and I'm doing gigs, but I get sick, what happens? What do I do then? I'm not a student. So what does insurance look like? And then slowly but surely, it started to just become, well, now I want an organization where I am an employee of this organization. So if I get sick, I have health insurance, I have dental insurance. When I'm ready to retire, I have a 401k, I have this and I have that. And again, not just for myself, but for other people that can now be employees of the organization, and not in the, because I think the world and can sometimes be controlling in some ways, but it wasn't about that. It's not about it's not about me. And I think, again, this is why I've always tried to sort of have this kind of like disassociation, so to speak, when it comes to like maybe the music, or, the ideas and so on and so forth that I have. Because, if somebody doesn't like you, well, I don't want to be a part of that organization, which is fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I didn't want the maybe like the people feeling, things, or whatever the case is, to stop the bigger picture, which is the growth of the Steel Pan community, and how, this can benefit everyone to be able to do performances and live off of this, and again have insurance, and have their instruments insured, and you know what I mean, all these different things, like the things that I started to see made up the world that we know, that doesn't yet include Pan, but should, you know? So everything from a union, you know what I mean? Like, a musicians union, or a Steel Pan union, or a Steel Pan, just everything. So that's the way I just started to view Steel Pan, and what I could potentially do for myself, that I felt that I needed to, again, just survive and sustain my life. And then I also started to think, well, when I have kids, you know what I mean? What is going to happen, and then how am I going to do this? And so I looked at all the different avenues. I looked at, teaching, which, honest to say, not something I thought I was going to get into. And then I did, and I started to enjoy it greatly. Like now I can't really even see myself not teaching, because I feel like I learned so much teaching, and I tell people that. But I mean, here or there, right? That's what might work for me may not necessarily work for somebody else, which I totally understand. But yeah, these are all the things that I think really drove me to create something. And Pan in Motion maybe officially started, I think, in 2014. As far as the name, that was the first time I had used the name, Pan in Motion. It was actually for a concert that I did, and I called the concert Pan in Motion. And then I liked the name. People had actually liked it and thought it was catchy. And so I just sort of stuck with that. And I started to just kind of continue to grow that. And so 2014 to, I don't know, oh yeah, that's about what, 8 years, I think later, maybe I think we're about, yeah, year eight. And I think I'm now starting to really see the growth and the potential for all these things that I once thought, or once, wanted to do. I'm like, actually, like, wait, we're actually not that far from, making this possible and making that possible and making so many other things possible. So yeah, that was, I think, all just really a part of what I had envisioned for, like I said, Pan in Motion. Just yeah, an organization that could just help people and provide opportunities. And that's one of the things I really push, providing opportunities, because I feel like for me as a coming up in steel pan, I used to ask for opportunities, and sometimes even beg for opportunities, which I'm not, ashamed of. I think, all of that is part of it, right? That's part of the experience. You kind of go with the cards you're dealt, or at least I do. And so I try to make it work as best as I can. And that was one of the things that I saw. And so it's like, how can we provide opportunities? We're Pan in Motion, where our organization is now in a number of schools, to where now I have other people teaching in addition to myself, and that makes me feel good because it's, now this person seems to be a really good teacher, or they're interested in it. So whether it's, just me having to train them directly, or them just having the experience on their own, then I can just leave them and say, hey, this is your school, you're going to work with them, Pan Emotion pays you, so on and so forth. And this is what I'm seeing now, and this in I think every single way that I could think of imaginable. I've had experiences with, performing in Carnegie Hall and performing different places and being like, wait a minute, they don't even want me to touch my own instrument. They're going to place the instrument for me, And so now it becomes like, hey guys, when we do a gig, we're going to write in this budget where people are going to move the instruments, because if we move the instruments ourselves, then we're tired before we even perform. We're out of it, we're in different places, so on and so forth. And so those are just some of the things that I've that really drives me to grow the organization and to just push out to people in the way we need to start to maybe look at this if we're not already doing it. And other people are doing it for sure. This is like I don't think that anything I'm saying is necessarily new or original. It was just never applied to steel pan, or at least I didn't see it in all those ways. And but again, I know that there's like organizations that exist and are doing, so many different things like this in different parts of the world. And so I'm just doing my part where I am to make, that happen, because I feel like I can, I'm trying, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You're
That's the
giving
best I
back
could do is
and moving
try.
forward.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if I fall a little short, at least I could say I tried, to make something happen, even if it doesn't work out in all the ways I hope.
That is wonderful. I remember it, as you're speaking, I was reminded of a Haitian gentleman, a musician, and he said that there's a saying in Haiti. Well, translated, it means after the party, the drums get heavy.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
So often you're the one left with everything. So
hmm
having that system in place, the structure in place, so that you're not the one left with a seven bass or whatever it is in the middle of the savannah.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Trinidad was also one of those places when the our group from Brooklyn, BSO, we went down to Trinidad, and that was one of the things that we not only did we laugh about and joke about so many times, but we were really astonished, when we finished practicing and they were just like, they were like, well, when are the trucks coming so we can pack, because that's what we're used to doing in Brooklyn. We physically pack the trucks ourselves. And they were like, "Oh, don't worry, we have guys for that." And we are like, "What? You have guys?" And and we're still there trying to help the guys,
yeah,
doing all these things. And then they're like, "Yeah, don't worry, you'll come to the Savannah tomorrow and thing." And we get to the Savannah, and everything is all the racks are set up, and
that's right.
the most of the pans are in place. We just have to put out our frontline pans or whatever. But we just came, and we literally felt the weight off of our shoulders, right? It was just like, wow, all we have to do is come and focus on practice and, and doing our best in the competition. And those are the experiences that now show us and show me, wow, this is the standard. This is what needs to be a standard and at that level. And I think the more that we continue to do that is also, I think, a bit of, respect and standard all around that people start to realize, especially for those who are not as familiar with the instrument and as familiar with the standard that the instrument holds or should hold. So just as you would respect maybe someone who plays a violin or is first violin, for that matter, is the same way that a steel pan, whether they're playing as a soloist, within an orchestra, or they're part of the percussion, section, that they should be respected, just as much in every single way of the sense. So yeah.
That is so true. That is so true. Kendall, this has been wonderful speaking with you.
Thank you.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to speak about?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I've hoped that I've answered all the questions as best as I could.
Right.
I feel like there were times when I'm like, maybe, I didn't get to all the parts of the questions, as far as just, the schooling and so on and so forth. But overall, just to definitely say that, dreams, being able to dream, I think, especially I think as people in general, not even just as a musician, I feel like, once you have a dream, you can absolutely achieve that. And I think I've heard many things from, music being a musician is not sustainable, and all of that, to much less pan, steel pan being sustainable, in the US, so much so, and then in New York, which is like one of probably the more expensive cities, right, in the US as well. So just thinking about it in all those ways, just really, not thinking of anything really being in your way. And that's how I try to operate as much as possible, and especially when it comes to steel band. Absolutely nothing is in my way, and if there's a wall in front of me, I can either go through it, I can go under it, I can go around it, I can go over it. There's so many different ways to get past this wall. So not looking at the wall as any type of barrier, but maybe as a pebble, in a sea, in a sea of possibilities and in a sea of dreams. So yeah, I think maybe that's just my message to the world.
I like that message because you can even use
Thank
the
you.
word to launch you, you know?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No walls in front of me.
Uh, Dr. Williams, as I said, I know it's a title that you've earned, that you've worked hard for. So, humility aside, well deserved. Well
Thank
deserved.
you so much.
And big hugs to your family. Much, much love to
Yes,
everyone. Yeah.
thank you.
Um, I'm looking forward to what is next.
Yes, yes, I have some things happening. So when those things come into play a little bit further, I'll be sure to keep you in the loop and make sure and send you as much as I can.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that. So,
Thanks.
thank you for coming on to checking in with Dr. B. It's been illuminating and fun.
Nice. Thank you so much for having me.